Welcome to another episode of the Not Another Yoga Class podcast and LinkedIn Live series. Today we have an amazing guest. We have Rachael Lemon, who is an executive leadership coach and the founder of Lemonade. Very nice play. And she is here talking all about... we also have her dog Harley, who might decide to contribute towards the discussion at some point. And we're here talking all about restructuring, something that Rachel's been through. So Rachel, could you please give me a little intro so people know who you are and what you do?
Okay, so mostly known for, I had a 30-year career in healthcare. So worked for the NHS mostly and some freelancing. My background was in pharmacy and then professional leadership. And then during the pandemic, I decided to become a coach, which was already embedded in my practice. But yeah, I went into coaching. I had my own illness. And it was a good point to just stop and pause and go, do I really want to be 70 running around trying to see 100 patients a day and swapping between my trainers and stilettos, because I was sort of in a leadership role, but also most people in the NHS will know your role was firefighting. So kind of like, yeah, it was a good time for me and everybody, I expect, to kind of think, what am I doing with my life? Because totally unexpected, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And it was really weird as well. Like a really weird time. My sister's a nurse in the NHS. And so for a lot of us, we were kind of sitting around doing nothing. And then you had people like yourself and her who were completely off their feet and being pushed to extremes.
Yeah, so I was lucky in one aspect. I had already lost my NHS job and I was teaching pharmaceutical sciences, but working with students who were between 16 and 19 on average at doing the pharmacy apprenticeships. And, you know, a lot of them, my area was the Southwest, so that included London. So you can imagine these like young teenagers in frontline pharmacies in the pandemic with no PPE, scared to death, living with vulnerable family members. You know, the information was changing daily on how to survive.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of them were really, really scared, like whether they caught COVID from a customer, a patient, or, you know, whether they went home and then their nan died because they brought it home from working in a pharmacy without protection. So it was a really surreal time. Yeah. And obviously the clinical updates were changing sort of daily. Like it was literally in the morning, what's the latest plan or not? But yeah, it was definitely, it was something. Like, I'm half a century old, like I would never have expected something like that. You know, we've had all of the other things like sarin, all of these different biohazards that we were taught about and how to deal with, but like never expected like suddenly the whole world to shut down one day. That was just insane.
It was bizarre. So I want to kind of go back a little bit to the period of employment you had where you experienced a restructuring, because you experienced it in a couple of different ways, right?
Yeah, so through my career, obviously as a senior leader in my department, restructuring happens a lot in the NHS. You know, where you've got to save money constantly. So it was always kind of it could be restructuring a service, restructuring a team, but it was something that happened a lot. And then my own personal experience, I had a new chief pharmacist come in, and before I'd been working as the sort of deputy with the old chief pharmacist, and she came in and obviously wanted a clean sweep. So she decided before she'd even come, I think, that she was restructuring and taking my job out of the structure, and kindly offered me a demotion 2 grades lower and told me I could take it or leave. So obviously I didn't take it.
Tell me about your mindset there, right? Tell me how that affects you when something like that happens.
I think, like, so for me, first of all, I literally, the first day I'd met her, I'd just come out of having a brain scan. I'd been in a car accident and they'd found an incidental, like, I had a scan of the top of my spine and they incidentally found something wrong with my brain. And so at the time, I didn't know if I'd got a brain tumor. And that was my first conversation with her. I was just walking back from the scan, saw her moving into her office, thought I'd pop in and say hi. And she was literally like, by the way, I'm restructuring and your job's going. You can take a demotion or leave. I don't care. It's up to you. And I was a bit like, oh, not your standard hello from a new person. So my kind of was like, oh, well, I might be dying, but my team who working like tirelessly, like they deserve a career escalator. So if you take my grade out of the restructure and you downgrade everybody's jobs, you're devaluing what we do. So from a personal point of view, I was quite protective of my team because I was like, well, I don't know if I'll be here or not, but ultimately, like, they still deserve to be able to step into my shoes, go into the job that I've created and worked for. That's how it works. We kind of, our careers escalate, don't they, throughout the journey. And so by downgrading to save money, you're devaluing the skills that people have got.
Yeah.
So
And how do you think what kind of effect does that have? Because that must take a real mental toll, especially if you've put in quite a lot of time and experience and effort into getting to the role you're in.
Yeah, so I think I was like kind of shocked. Like, it blindsided me, like I wasn't expecting it. And then I obviously, because I do professional leadership work, I had a lot of allies outside of my trust where I worked, and a lot of people supported me with really like invaluable advice. Like, so the guy I was telling you about earlier when we were talking was Ted Butler. He runs Pharmacy Management, which is now Pharmacy Healthcare. He lives in Australia, and he sort of mentored me through and said, look, don't let this be personal. Kind of like got a employment solicitor and let everything run through them. He said, don't read, one of the best bits of advice he gave to me as someone in a senior role was, don't read any letters or anything, just give them straight to the solicitor, because they will try and discredit you to justify taking your job away, basically.
Got it.
So I think probably if I hadn't have had that mentorship from him, I probably would have read all these letters and probably got really depressed about all these things that were being said about me that weren't fact based. They weren't evidence, they weren't backed up with anything. They were just somebody trying to justify a decision to save a lot of money.
Do you think the head games that are involved there are deliberate sometimes to kind of shake you up a little bit, or do you think it is purely them just trying to justify this cut?
Yeah, I think because obviously, like we always have to be conscious of our economics in the NHS. It's chronically underfunded. It always has been ever since I qualified. So yeah, we've always got to try and save money, but it's not always an efficient cost saving to get rid of your senior team.
Yeah.
Because when you get in people that are newly qualified, they don't have the experience, which then means you might have to have 3 newly qualified people, and you also lose the continuity. So the person who was in my role before me, he had worked there for 50 years, like his whole career, and there wasn't a single question he couldn't answer. So like, to have got rid of someone like that just to save maybe 10 grand, 15 grand would be a false economy, because he knew everything about everything, basically. And you can't teach that in uni. You can't.
Yeah.
It's something you have to acquire through life. You can't teach people those things. And obviously pharmacy is a huge area. So we've got obviously like oncology, we have things like radiotherapy, nuclear pharmacy, things that don't come up very often, but when you need to know the answer, you need someone who knows what they're talking about. So like all of those things that he knew, if we ever had anything that came up that was weird and wonderful, he just knew the answer. So yeah, it's short-sighted if you think, oh, I'm just going to wipe out the older people, and I wasn't particularly old then, but like the older team members, the longer standing people, to save money. And I think it's all about balance as well. Like, we have a lot of vacancies, and all organizations do, don't they? And you've got one branch of HR saying you've got to save, or the exec saying you've got to save money, and then you've got all these vacancies that you haven't been able to fill for a year. So actually, the most sensible thing to do is like, look at the vacancies, look at skill mix, and decide where you can save money without actually people losing their jobs, or offer people the chance. If there's genuinely people that are like, say, 55 or over, and they think, well, I might want to take early retirement, rather than pushing them out, like actually let them have redundancy or let them have the money that they earned. Because I've seen that a lot as well, which is really heartbreaking, is people are like so close to retirement but not close enough. They lose their job and then they're basically unemployable, because not many people want to take on someone who's sort of, even in a healthcare profession, people don't want to take on people that are like 58 thinking, oh, they're going to retire in a few years, so what's the point, kind of thing. So you see that ageism a lot as well. So I think it's kind of short-sighted, isn't it? It's kind of like there's smarter ways to do it that are actually like leading with empathy, like leading with compassion. And I think that's often the thing as well, where a lot of restructures happen, or you have a big long consultation for a year even, where people don't know whether they're going to lose their jobs. They're worried about whether they can feed their family, pay their mortgage, and then something will happen and change, and then the whole thing's just binned off. And it's like, wow, you've just tortured all your staff's mental health for what? For some tick box exercises.
I think you've landed on something here, right? So I think what needs to happen whenever this sort of restructuring occurs is a plan of action to be able to preserve the mental well-being of the people that are going to lose their jobs, but also the people that are still around after.
Yeah, and I think that's just as important, isn't it? So for like me, in that case, I chose to exit. Obviously, it was a bit more complex than that. I went to a tribunal, and the outcome was positive for me. And like I said, if I hadn't have had support and mentorship, I probably would have had pretty bad mental health problems, because it's, going through tribunals is a whole other episode. That's, tough. But actually, the people that are left behind, or people who have then they've built a relationship with their manager, they've had the support and encouragement while they're kind of qualifying and finding their feet, etc. Then suddenly they've got to navigate, will my new boss like me? Will my new boss do that? Will my new boss do that to me? If she's come in and done that to her, will I be next? And I think as well, like if we are restructuring and we do have to lose jobs, and if that's something we have to do, we also have a duty of care to our employees to give them the support they need to apply for new jobs and empower them to do that, and take control before the outcome. So, it's all right saying, like, we'll tell you at the end of the consultation whether you've got your job or not. But those 3 to 6 months of extreme stress, actually, we could be getting in, people that could help people revamp their CVs, for example. Like, the last time I did a CV was probably 20 years ago. So like the whole landscape's changed, hasn't it? They're kind of like old school name, address, email,
cover letter,
date of birth, all of that kind
hobbies.
of like maybe. I like to go out with my friends at the weekend and watch all the old stuff. That just doesn't cut it in today's world, does it? So
it doesn't.
You can imagine
That's a really low cost way of doing it, right? That's a really low cost thing. That's a way of supporting the people that are transitioning or being forced to transition.
Yeah, and obviously, and then as well, if people, it might just be some people are coasting along in their job, and that restructure gives them the nudge to actually say, well, actually, I'm not really happy here. And with a bit of support and encouragement, they might leave. So then you have the natural kind of selection where you don't have to push people out purposely. You can let people who want to leave, and then look at what's left. So if you kind of look at people who naturally might want to get to the next stage in their career, but they need to move to do that, there's not space within the organisation, or people that do want to retire early, or they do want a career pivot. If you kind of work with those people first, and then you probably find you haven't really got to make redundancies or forced kind of termination of contracts, because most of the time it will resolve itself. But having a safe space for people to even talk about it and say, well, actually, maybe I could do something else, but what could I do? And having someone there to support you and say, well, let's have a look at the skills you've got. Let's look at what you might like to do. Because, like I've worked with people this year, particularly, or sort of last year, things like people who've been a doctor but wanted to own a flower shop. And so and they've got to that same sort of, you get to your 40s and things change. You don't want to be running around all day 12 hours a day doing long shifts. You know, you do get to a certain stage in life where you actually, and I think the pandemic is something that really made people stop and think about, what do I actually want to do? Am I just like running on a treadmill? So I think it, you know, it is a good starting point, isn't it, to say, actually, do I want to do something different, and can I do something different, and then giving people the skills to do that without giving them sort of nervous breakdowns, them ending up on antidepressants and feeling like they're worthless, because I think that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I
You
think
get people to think that they're not, you know, oh, they're getting rid of me because I'm crap at my job, or that kind of thing. And actually, as my mentor said, it's probably never about you as a person.
yeah, true. We're in a position right now
it's,
where people can literally do anything as well. Everything's accessible now. You know, anyone can start a business. Anyone can do, we can pivot, and lots of people do.
yeah, and we're not starting from zero. So whatever you did
Exactly.
before,
Yeah.
you've got all of those skills to sort of take with you. And I think as well, like especially like in medicine, it's the only career where you're expected to work from the day you qualify till the day you die. Like if we look at like the police, fire service, etc., the army, they sign up in stints, and like most police and firemen, they kind of retire at 40 to 50, and then they go on and have a secondary career.
Yeah.
Whereas the NHS, you know, you've literally got doctors, pharmacists behind the scene that are like slumped on their desk because they've worked 60 hours a week for the last 50 years. And then the extra, you know, the extra unpaid work that you do. So they've probably worked like 100 years worth of service, and kind of literally to the moment they flop. And yeah, so we need to look again at, yeah, this whole idea that we can only do one thing in our life, and that it doesn't just
Absolutely.
evolve. Yeah, you know, because that's the thing, isn't it? We should all be able to evolve, and everything we've learned, and I see that especially in women, they don't realise how many transferable skills they've got. So, you know, like to me, I was like, if you're a mum, you've got 3 kids, different ages, you can get them all to different schools, feed them, give them lunch, breakfast, you know, take them to 3 different, you know, ballet, football, game club, whatever, and you can manage all of that. And then you come back into the workplace after a career break and you're told that you're not worthy. Actually, you know, you can easily manage a team of like 20 adults in my eyes. It's like, and
Yeah, I totally agree.
people don't recognize that those are skills, you know, and they are. And I think the thing around businesses as well, isn't it, like setting up a business is just as hard or harder than working for somebody. And I think at the moment there's a lot of like, especially like when we met on LinkedIn, but there's a lot of people on LinkedIn that make it look easy, like, oh, just quit your job and, you know, you can go and live in Bali and you can live on the beach with a laptop and work 3 hours a day and you'll be a millionaire. And that's not the reality. So
I've put in
whatever
more
you,
hours with this than I ever did employed.
yeah, so the reality is, you know, like as much as employment can be a pain because you're being told what to do and you've got to toe the party line, etc., but you do get sick pay, you do get holiday pay, and, you know, there are some, you know, the perks that we perhaps don't recognize. So I think it's kind of about balance, isn't it? So, and again, it doesn't have to be either or, does it? We could work 2 or 3 days a week and get paid and then set up our passion project, so we haven't got to be worrying about whether we can pay our mortgage this month, etc., because that happens so much in business, doesn't it, where people are left. Obviously, like for me, I got I had a payout, so that was a good starting point for me to set up a business. I knew that I could survive for X amount of time without having the pressure of having to just work with anybody or do anything. And I think that's something as well, isn't it? It's giving ourselves the choice, because the first year of business, you're just figuring out, really, aren't you? Like who you want to work with,
100%.
like,
What it is that you're
yeah,
doing, who you're serving, what you're offering, all of that stuff.
yeah. It's like my second year, and I'm still like tweaking and like, okay, I really like working with these people. They light me up. These people I can help, but does it make my soul sing, kind of thing, or am I just doing it to get paid? And like for me, obviously, for me, I want to do stuff that lights me up, you know, lights my energy up, and work with people that feel the same. So yeah, we don't want to be trapped, whether it's at work or in a business. We don't want to be that. It's kind of just trapped, do we? We don't want to go from one life that's like ticking a box to another one. And I think that's an easy trap to fall into, isn't it?
I think so. I think that's a great kind of ending to this conversation, because ultimately it not only have we sort of covered some of the insights and practical things that employers can do just to make it easier, these types of moments and situations, but also I think we've given a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel and kind of demonstrated that there are options. What I'd love to see is organizations embracing exactly what you just said, and that is giving people the advice and helping them find either or as you said, a combination of both once these restructures happen.
Yeah, and I honestly think organisations have got a duty to the people that work for them to look after their well-being and not drive them into a mental health spiral, and make it really clear. I think that's the thing, as someone who's perhaps managing a restructure from the top down and you're in the middle, is allowing managers and leaders to be honest with their teams. And if you know that the outcome's predetermined, then you should be able to have honest conversations and say, look, whatever happens at the end of the day, we've got to cut X amount of jobs, and that's non-negotiable. So we need to work together to see how we can do that with the least upset, rather than saying to everybody, like, we care about what you say, we're going to make you do this big long consultation, and actually nobody cares.
So every single episode has filtered down at the end to open and honest conversation. And so it's like the running theme of the entire series. Look, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on and talking us through your experiences. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.